Digital media scares the living shit out of a lot of forward-thinking freedom of speech advocates, and for very good reason. In the good old days, when fascists like Hitler wanted to rewrite history for his own benefit, he had to resort to a good old-fashioned book burning. Increasingly these days, our books, films, television and music are held in digital libraries, and we only own a license to access it. And whatever it is can be changed on a fucking whim. Someone might lose a copyright legal battle and suddenly a 2-minute section of your favourite movie gets chopped. Someone might decide that the violence in episode 4 of your favourite TV show is too much for a PG rating, and then overnight it gets re-edited. Or, as we've seen on several occasions, online books have been edited and or censored because of political pressure. Digital media is scary because it makes our history and our knowledge entirely mutable. That's a posh way of saying, if you don't own a hard copy of a history book, who fucking knows if some wanker is tinkering with the facts whilst you're sleeping? So why the fuck is this relevant? Well, EA and DICE are yet again in hot water for trying to peddle a post-Gamersgate SJW BuzzFeed agenda and forcing it down the throats of Battlefield fans. They have done a quick airbrush job on 20th century history and declared that from now on, in World War II, all regiments and units in Europe are comprised of soldiers who are a random selection of races, ethnicities, genders and ableness. Unless, of course, you're a German, in which case you're an evil white dude. Historical accuracy is now optional, because it's more important to fly the rainbow flag above the Allied forces than deal with the actual gender and racial tensions from this historical period. Unless, of course, you're German, in which case you're just going to be an evil white dude. EA is trying to promote a narrative along the lines of the poster girl of Battlefield 5 is a frontline elite combat soldier who is both female and disabled. And there is a massive backlash because generic gamers are vicious, little, uneducated, ignorant, sexist bastards. The actual narrative is, as always, more complicated. Most Battlefield fans, and war gamers in general, have a pretty good idea of what happened in World War II. They know women and non-white people were actively involved in combat during the war because, you know, it was after all a world war. They're just not particularly happy that EA and DICE are trying to rewrite history and turn the battle for Europe into a gender-neutral, multi-ethnic fantasy world where amputation was instantly cured by retro-futuristic mechanical limbs. And it doesn't matter who you are, because you could do any job in the army you wanted to, because they cynically want to boost sales of in-game cosmetic purchases by increasing players' emotional engagement with their in-game avatars by appeasing the wheatgrass smoothie drinking precious snowflake generation, who incidentally probably don't play video games where you can crush a man's skull by running him over in a fucking tank. Just saying. In short, EA has gone full BuzzFeed, full social justice warrior on Second World War history, and a lot of people think this is getting very stupid, and a cynical attempt to buff up the history of the war to make it more politically correct to boost sales of microtransactions. EA's reaction has been remarkable. They have basically said the backlash is ridiculous and stems from bigotry, racism, sexism, entitlement, and called people out as uneducated. On top of that, the creative director told everyone that if they don't like it, don't buy the game. He also invoked the image of his little 13-year-old daughter as a defence, essentially decrying the fact that she had to live in a world where she might not be able to play a World War II frontline soldier. In fact, maybe the Electronic Arts PR department were a little too effective in organising this counterattack, because, fucking bizarrely, both EA Chief Creative Officer Patrick Soderlund and Battlefield 5 design director Alan Kurtz simultaneously invoked the sad image of their respective daughters as justification. Looks like orchestrated public relations bullshit to me. Because, well, it is public relations bullshit. So let's not operate under any misunderstandings here. I've seen a lot of people defending EA and DICE on this issue under the mistaken belief that they are championing diversity, tolerance and progressive thinking. What they are mistakenly doing is championing EA's cynical attempts to make it easier to peddle microtransactions at the expense of history. This scenario is entirely reminiscent of Gamersgate. If you oppose them, you're a meanie who is sexist and bigoted, when really the narrative should be, open your fucking eyes. They are only pulling this stunt to sell more pointless shit to people. This is not about diversity. It's about peddling microtransactions. Look, personally, I'm not particularly upset about their identity politics plans for Battlefield 5. I think it's going to be a shitty game for a load of different reasons. I mean, the trailer managed to have 4 tanks, several planes, a motorbike, a barbed wire cricket bat, a downed Zeppelin, Celtic war paint, a car crash, and some posh bird with a robotic arm, all within a 50-foot radius of each other in the space of a few seconds. And don't even get me started about the Battle Royale cockfuckery they have planned. This game is spectacularly childish and fucking ridiculous for many, many reasons. I've not even had time yet to get upset about the fact there are female frontline soldiers or multi-ethnic regiments, but I can see why lots of people think this is all getting too fucking silly now, and that SJW culture is starting to break their immersion. I'm going to nail my colours to the mast on certain issues, in case you haven't guessed already. I think racism and bigotry are fucking idiotic and destructive traits in both a person and a society. I think that anyone that genuinely believes women can't be excellent fighters has clearly never worked in a nightclub. And considering that one of the fastest human beings on the planet is missing 2 legs, it should be pretty obvious to anyone that physical disability doesn't dictate your abilities and limitations in every sphere of your life. Okay, maybe Pistorius isn't an ideal example because he did admittedly shoot his girlfriend to death, but the essence of my argument still holds true. Your race, your gender, and your physical form does not define your worth as a human being. Furthermore, diversity in video games is a non-issue for me. I've played Fallout and Skyrim for years. For me, playing as a man or a woman and having a female or a male companion that might be straight or gay, ethnically ranging from white all the way up to super mutant, is not only the norm, these days it's basically old news. I think that today most players don't care about these issues unless they interfere with the common sense reality of the world. A good example of breaking common sense reality would be, imagine if I was playing the Japanese lesbian video game Kindred Spirits on the Roof, and I emailed the developers and said, "This game is racist and sexist. Why do I have to play as a Japanese lesbian schoolgirl? I demand the right to play as a creepy, old, fat, balding, sweaty white guy." They would tell me that they were sorry, but it doesn't make sense within the context of the game. And that is a concept you will need to hold in your heads for a while. I'm completely sold on the idea of society evolving beyond sexism, racism and discrimination. I fucking want the world to become a tolerant utopia like in fucking Star Trek. But fucking hell, I don't think we're going to achieve these goals by fucking lying about the past, rewriting history, employing deception, and by abusing people who cry foul when they see dishonesty. And make no mistake, this is all about EA being dishonest about both history and, more importantly, their motives. The main character in a semi-realistic World War II war game is going to be a female Special Forces amputee, and the soldiers in mainland Europe are going to be completely multiracial units. You fucking what? That's not what happened in World War II. What's the first mission going to be? Rendezvous with a regiment of all-gay stripper commandos so you can sneak behind enemy lines and rescue a transsexual vegan brigadier and get Zur home in time for a parliamentary vote banning cis white males from holding public office. Personally, I think what I just described sounds like a fucking awesome concept for a video game, and I'll sell you the copyright. But fucking hell, if you plan on making it, you have to employ the correct genre. EA can make any fucking game it wants and have whatever story it likes, with whatever characters it likes, as long as it fits the genre. You can make the president a fucking vampire hunter if you want. You can turn the 19th century Bennett sisters into crack zombie killers if you want. You can turn cowboys into alien killers if you so fancy. You can have a black woman as a serving deck officer on a United States vessel smack bang in the middle of racial segregation. All of these things can be done perfectly well if you use an appropriate genre. Sci-fi, comedy, or some kind of mashup. But you will struggle to make a historically accurate movie and insert spaceships. It's tough making a gritty political thriller with a Rebecca Black soundtrack. And it's pretty fucking hard to make a semi-realistic, authentic first-person shooter set in World War II and completely throw any care about historical accuracy out of the fucking cab. I'm not talking about bending the facts a little for the sake of fun. I'm fine with that. It's a video game. It's not a NASA flight simulation training tool. I know that sometimes inconvenient facts can get in the way of a good story. No snide comments, please. You have to allow a certain degree of flexibility when you're adapting something to fit a video game, a film or a TV show. I am fine with that. But this is not the same as reconstructing history according to modern day values. That's the difference between adapting something and the wholesale changing of its very fucking meaning. I mean, if history isn't important, then in Battlefield 5, why not give them laser guns and hover cars, and they can ride woolly mammoths into battle, whilst throwing exploding fucking dildos at each other? Why set it in World War II at all? Why not set it in Pandora? Ah yeah, it's set in World War II because it's historically significant to the game's narrative. Well, history is either important to the game or it isn't. You can't appeal to history when it suits you and abandon it when it doesn't, and expect people not to fucking mind. The bullshit and inconsistencies in EA's sales pitch on this fiasco is pretty obvious, because after all, I don't see them making the Nazi soldiers a gender-neutral multi-ethnic utopia. Oh yeah, I keep forgetting. The Germans are the bad guys, so they can all be evil white men. Thanks, I guess. Rewriting the history of World War II so that army regiments are multiracial and frontline crack troops are disabled women with robotic limbs would make for a great story. If you're making some kind of sci-fi alternative timeline steampunk mashup. But in Battlefield? Battlefield, the franchise that EA's own developers describe as almost like a simulator. You can't just make shit up like that and expect people to blindly accept it. And you can't just accuse people of being racist, sexist and uneducated because they think the ideas are fucking nonsense. Because the ideas are fucking nonsense. I'm not suggesting it's improper to have female characters in the game. I'm saying, if you do, you have to explain it. I'm not suggesting it's improper to have non-white troops in the game. Non-white troops were the norm in many theatres of war in World War II. I'm saying that whatever choices they make, it has to make sense within the context of history. In World War II, the US Army was notorious for its segregation. So if you want African American soldiers in the game wandering around the Bavarian forest in a mixed race patrol, well, fantastic. But you also have to commit to making the narrative make sense too. So that situation makes sense. Which, incidentally, historically, it fucking totally does not make sense. You can't just wave a magic wand and pretend World War II was a sea of glitter, cuddles and plushies, because it doesn't make fucking sense. And it also trivialises the victims of the very real oppression EA are claiming to champion. The Tuskegee Airmen, female Russian snipers, the North African regiments, the French Maquisards, the Indian regiments fighting for the Commonwealth, the Guinea Pig Club, disabled pilots who worked in command and communications despite horrific burn injuries, the Indian pilots fighting for the British in the Battle of Britain, the women who risked their lives every day working in ammunition factories, or the women who lost their lives in the flying corps transporting military planes around the country. World War II is a catalogue of bravery and self-sacrifice performed by able and disabled peoples of all ethnicities and genders. You don't have to make shit up. The only reason to lie and distort history is if you're too fucking lazy to tell the real stories. By quickly slapping the paintbrush of SJW culture on the side of World War II, their contributions are being trivialised by distorted representations of history, and their true stories are lost in the background noise of bullshit. At the time of World War II, there was racism, there was sexism, there was segregation, and there were internment camps for Japanese. There was bigotry on both sides of the conflict. These are uncomfortable truths that need to be confronted, not airbrushed out. But you're not going to make the world a better place by lying about it. If EA is uncomfortable setting a realistic war game in World War II because of the uncomfortable truths and realities of history, then perhaps they should set their next battlefield in a period where war was nicer, more gender neutral and friendly, so they can focus exclusively on the death, murder and mutilation of war without getting upset about hurt feelings and political correctness. When Battlefield 5 design director Alan Kurtz states that the inclusion of playable female characters in the World War II shooter will put him on the right side of history. Well, that is literally, and in the most pure sense, one of the most fucking idiotic statements I have ever heard drop out of the mouth of a Homo sapien whose brain is still adequately supplied with oxygen and who is not intoxicated. This fucking cretin is trying to justify the distortion of history to service his sales and marketing agenda, and claims that he will end up on the right side of history. Well, very sorry to break it to you, chum, but let's see how you feel if someone comes along in a few years' time and rewrites your history. Because history doesn't mean shit if you can change it on a fucking whim. Let's rewind that and play it again. Alan Kurtz is appealing to the legacy of history to justify distorting history. That is fucking stupidity so intense it could create a tear in the very fabric of space-time. Vikings, will sing mighty ballads in the halls of Valhalla to honour the magnitude of this stupidity. And let's remember, they're not doing any of this out of some moral conviction. Electronic Arts, the world leader in microtransactions and pedo-caches, who broke Star Wars and has ripped off a generation of gamers, is suddenly having fucks to give about making the world a better place? I don't fucking think so. This is all about fucking money. It's about marketing strategy. It's about trying to get a larger proportion of the players to develop an emotional investment in their fucking player profile, so they spend money on silly fucking face paint, new hats and gun skins to further personalise their experience. EA are not doing all of this because they're invested in social justice. They're doing it because they have heavily invested in the psychological manipulation of player spending patterns. This is why EA is shitting on the history of World War II and shoveling fake diversity into the Battlefield franchise. So they have no right accusing people of being uneducated bigots because they don't approve of EA changing history so that World War II looks like a fucking 1970s Coca-Cola commercial, so they can increase player engagement with their avatars and sell more microtransactions. Well, EA Chief Creative Officer Patrick Soderlund was on record as saying he is struggling to explain the controversy to his 13-year-old daughter. Well, I might be able to help him out there. You look her straight in the eye and say, Daddy is in trouble because I was pandering to the BuzzFeed generation, distorting history, and got caught fucking lying about World War II, and I tried to defend myself by calling everyone racist, uneducated bigots, when really I was just trying to sell people microtransactions. I reckon that would do it, mate. Then you need to write, "Here comes stupid" on a piece of cardboard and hang it around your neck. If you need any more parenting advice, I'll be here all week. And for the record, next time you guys fuck up your marketing strategy and it explodes in your faces, leave your fucking children out of it. They're not human fucking shields, and that kind of behaviour is fucking shameful. EA's creative officer's best advice to all of us is, if you don't like it, then don't buy it. Well, I've bought every Battlefield game for the last decade, but I'm going to give this one a miss. So at least his advice to his customers is fucking spot on. But for now, good luck and happy hunting.